What's up, guys? Nuance Bro checking in, and today we're going to be talking about the Iowa caucus and its results now that it's 100% reporting, kind of. But before we start, please go to nuancebro.com/join if you'd like to support the channel. Our channel has a 96% impression disadvantage according to the data that's been collected, so your support means everything. Now, on Monday, February 3rd, the Iowa caucuses happened, and a bunch of Democrats came out to support their respective candidates. But there was a bit of a snafu. You see, usually within a couple hours, you have about 90% of the results plus that are already in. But this time was a bit different. In fact, if you watched on this channel, we actually live streamed the caucuses. I was waiting to see the results and report them to my audience, but we kept waiting, and we were still at 0% of the precincts reporting. So everybody was wondering what was going on until the Iowa Democrats finally announced that they were postponing the results in order to ensure quality controls. So this immediately got everybody suspicious. People were wondering, well, what do you mean by quality controls? What's going on? There was also another issue with the Democrats not releasing a specific poll that was coming out right before the Iowa caucus that had Bernie up a bit. And then people were wondering because there was this app that was announced that they were using for the first time, and there was a lot of confusion about that. At first, they came out and said, oh, the app was fine. It didn't crash or anything. No problems there. Then it was later announced that there was problems with the app and that was causing a lot of issues. Now, even though we had 0% of precincts reporting, you still had candidates like Pete Buttigieg who came out and made their speeches as if they won anyway and declared themselves victorious.
What a night! Because tonight, an improbable hope became an undeniable reality. By all indications, we are going on to New Hampshire victorious.
We can even see tweets like this one from Pete Buttigieg on the night of the Iowa caucus saying, Iowa, you have shocked the nation. By all indications, we are going on to New Hampshire victorious. Hashtag Iowa caucuses. Now, of course, the Buttigieg campaign explained that they got these results from their own internal numbers, their precinct captains reporting the numbers to them, but these aren't the official numbers. But they believed by all indications, they did something miraculous that night and they won and they were victorious, blah, 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 even though the official results weren't actually out. So then the next day, finally, some results were published. We had about 62% of the precincts reporting, and we finally had some of those results. So with about 62% of precincts reporting, you had Pete Buttigieg reported at almost 27% and Bernie Sanders at 25%. So Pete Buttigieg was about 2% ahead of Bernie Sanders in the total state delegate equivalents. Now, what about this app that everybody was talking about? There was this app that was newly introduced and newly designed specifically for the Iowa caucuses, and they were thinking about using it in Nevada as well, but nobody knew who the creator of the app was or, all that information. So then people looked into it, and it turns out, you can't make this up, it was a company by the name of Shadow Inc. When you're talking about a process that's all about transparency and being open with the public about what's going on, including more numbers and metrics so everybody can see what's going on, you hire a company by the name of Shadow Inc. The complete lack of awareness and terrible optics behind that name is just too hilarious. So people pulled up information from the FEC and they saw this company, Shadow Inc. They saw that the Nevada State Democratic Party sent them money. They also saw other candidates who sent them money, including the Buttigieg campaign. And not only that, but according to the Associated Press, maker of glitchy Iowa caucus app has Democratic Party ties. And if we scroll down, Shadow Inc. was launched by Acronym, a nonprofit corporation founded in 2017 by Tara McGowan, a political strategist who runs companies aimed at promoting Democratic candidates and priorities. McGowan, 34, is married to Michael Hall, or Hallie, I don't know how you say that, a senior strategist for Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign, which records show has also paid Shadow Inc. $42,500 for software. McGowan sought to distance herself from Shadow Inc.'s Iowa Reporter app on Monday night, characterizing the app developer as an independent company. In a separate statement, an acronym spokesman said the nonprofit organization is an investor in several companies, including Shadow, but was eagerly awaiting more information from the Iowa Democratic Party with respect to what happened. So that's quite the coincidence, where you have the founder of the parent company of the app, whose husband works for the Pete Buttigieg campaign, and then Pete Buttigieg, all this positive stuff is happening for him in the Iowa caucuses, even though he wasn't even projected to be the winner according to the different polls and things like that. And a lot of the early numbers that were being reported favored Pete Buttigieg earlier on, and we're going to get to some of the later numbers as well, so you'll see what really changed. But yeah, that seems like quite a bit of a conflict of interest. Now, you also had the company itself, Shadow Inc., come out on their Twitter page and confirm the reports. We sincerely regret the delay in reporting of the results of last night's Iowa caucuses and the uncertainty it has caused to the candidates, their campaigns, and Democratic caucus goers. As the Iowa Democratic Party has confirmed, the underlying data and collection process via Shadow's mobile caucus app was sound and accurate, but our process to transmit that caucus results data generated via the app to the IDP was not. Importantly, this issue did not affect the underlying caucus results data. We worked as quickly as possible overnight to resolve this issue, and the IDP has worked diligently to verify results. Shadow is an independent, for-profit technology company that has contracted with the Iowa Democratic Party to build a caucus reporting mobile app, which was optional for local officials to use. The goal of the app was to ensure accuracy in a complex reporting process. We will apply the lessons learned in the future and have already corrected the underlying technology issue. We take these issues very seriously and are committed to improving and evolving to support the Democratic Party's goal of modernizing its election processes. So eventually, 1 day passed, 2 days passed, 3 days passed, and then we started finally getting more of the results trickling in. But as they were trickling in, people started noticing some weird discrepancies in the underlying data. For example, an article in the New York Times, Iowa caucus results riddled with errors and inconsistencies. And here we can see one example, problems with delegate allocations. And you can see the two different numbers highlighted, one with the final alignment votes and the SDEs. The Iowa Democratic Party has corrected some errors, but the errors became far more frequent on Wednesday as the count dragged on. On Wednesday afternoon, the Iowa Democratic Party released a wave of results showing Deval Patrick sweeping central Des Moines. That was incorrect. Mr. Sanders' votes had been reported as being for Mr. Patrick, while Elizabeth Warren's tallies went to Tom Steyer. The Iowa Democratic Party quickly corrected these errors, and they are not included in our overall count of discrepancies in more than 100 precincts. The party has not yet addressed other irregularities reported to it or circulating on social media. In another case, the Times alerted the party to an error at 6 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday that remained in the data released several hours later. So you can see another example here where the first alignment votes were 0 for Warren and Sanders, but then went to 51 and 44. And then another example where it was 50 and 41 for Steyer and Patrick, and then went to 0, which it doesn't make sense. So you have the Times that looked at the data and they saw errors in more than 100 precincts. That's quite a lot, especially when you see what right now, as the results stand at the very moment, there's only a 0.1% difference between Buttigieg and Sanders when it comes to state delegate equivalents. So remember the vote count I showed you guys at 62%, where there was almost a 2% difference between Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders. Well, now you can see with 99 to 100% of the precincts reporting, there is only a 0.1% difference between Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, where you can see Pete Buttigieg has a state delegate equivalent count of 564 versus Bernie Sanders at 562. So only a 2 state delegate equivalent difference. Now, this gets even more interesting when you look at the way some of these precincts were conducted when it came to tiebreakers, as they like to say. And a lot of them weren't even really tiebreakers because there was no real tie to break. You just had to do it was just rounding differences that they need to account for, which they incorrectly did. As we can see in this article from Popular Mechanics, the Iowa caucuses were a complete mess, and we did the math to prove it. And if we scroll down, We have this section on delegate math. There are 3 steps to the delegate math: calculate, round, adjust. First, it's a calculation for each candidate. It's number of voters that candidate got, number of delegates at stake divided by total voters at the caucus, which gives the raw number of delegates that candidate earned, typically not a whole number. Second is rounding. There's nothing tricky at this step. Just round up if the decimal is 0.5 or higher, and round down otherwise. After rounding, the candidate's delegate counts may not add to the total delegates at stake. That calls for an adjustment step. If several candidates were rounded down, their delegate counts might add up to less than the intended total. The spare delegate is then given to the candidate who was the closest to the next delegate, essentially the one who got rounded down the farthest. Similarly, the other way, if rounding makes the total go too high, then a delegate is taken back from the candidate who got rounded up the farthest. If 2 candidates are tied at the adjustment step, then a coin is flipped to see who gains/loses the adjustment delegate. That's the only time coin flips are supposed to happen. Now we look at the errors. Des Moines Precinct 80 has already received heavy attention centering on this tweet and video from that day. So this was actually quite a popular tweet that went around showing a coin flip in Des Moines Precinct 80, and it said Bernie's group had 101 people. Pete's group had 66 people. Bernie and Pete end up tied at 4 delegates following a coin toss. This is democracy? So that doesn't really make sense. You have 101 people for Bernie, 66 people for Pete. Why would they both get the same amount of delegates? And this is the coin flip.
Tails.
There you go.
You get the delegate.
So let's look at the results. Before precinct data was published, the tweet might have explained some sort of miscommunication. Now that the data is officially out, it confirms the numbers in the tweet. Sanders had 101 and Buttigieg had 66 on final alignment, but both received 4 delegates. The full picture painted by the data is 101 votes for Sanders, 66 for Buttigieg, and 48 for Biden, plus 25 uncommitted voters, for a total of 240. Delegates were officially distributed 4-4-2 for Sanders, Buttigieg, Biden, but that should have been 5-3-2. Why? Because after the first calculation step, Sanders had 4.21, Buttigieg had 2.75, and Biden had 2. These round to 4, 3, and 2 respectively, which add up to 9. The precinct had 10 delegates to give out, so it needed to give the final delegate to the candidate closest to their next delegate. At 0.79 away from his 5th delegate, Sanders was closer than Biden, who was 1 away from his 3rd delegate, and Buttigieg, who was 1.25 away from his next 4th delegate. The 10th delegate unequivocally should have gone to Sanders. So that's just one of the egregious examples, and we can see there's a lot of other examples in this article, so if you want to read through it, go ahead. But that obviously wasn't the only coin flip situation that happened. There were a lot of other ones, which I'm going to show you 2 of them right now. For example, this one.
When you're watching and then flip it over. Flip it over. Heads. I can. Heads. Buttigieg.
All right, so Buttigieg will get 3 delegates.
So here you can see a young guy and he's doing the flip, and it's clear he's never done a coin flip before, doesn't know what he's doing. And they say, listen, after you flip it, you gotta flip over the coin, like you do, you flip it over on your hand like that. And this guy doesn't know what to do. So he flips it and then he's got it in his hand and then he flips it like this after he's already seen the result. You can't do that. But of course, that coin flip went to Buttigieg. Just like the previous one we talked about where they did the math wrong, where they shouldn't have even done a coin flip in the first place. Here's another one which I think is pretty hilarious because you have a guy who's actually wearing a Kamala Harris sweatshirt. She's not even running anymore, but he's wearing a Kamala Harris sweatshirt and he's doing the coin flip, and it's between Buttigieg and Sanders, and he's doing it having the Buttigieg rep as the witness. And he does the flip, puts it on his hand, and he says, okay, you got heads or whatever, and then he gets rid of the result. And you can see the guy who's the Buttigieg rep kind of looks at it like it seemed like he didn't believe what the Harris person was saying, even though the result went for his guy. Which, it's just so ridiculous. Like, how come there aren't other witnesses there to look and verify the result of the coin flip?
So, go ahead.
You're gonna call. I'm gonna flip.
Okay.
All right. Jeez, this is unbelievable. Ready?
Yep. Tails.
It is tails. So Pete Buttigieg wins the coin flip and the second delegate. We're gonna name the delegates in just a second. Whose coin is this?
So when I look at the results of the coin flip and I see a lot of these different coin flips are going to Buttigieg disproportionately, it doesn't make a lot of sense mathematically and statistically. There seems to be some foul play going on, but just there with those 3 coin flips, if those didn't go to Buttigieg or one of them went to Sanders instead, Sanders would have won. Not to mention all the other discrepancies, which we're going to show you another one where the Sanders campaign released a press release where they talked about a lot of the different discrepancies. So as you can see here, Bernie Sanders' campaign declares victory in Iowa and releases discrepancies. Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign on Thursday celebrated winning the popular vote in the first and second round of the Iowa caucus and released publicly discrepancies in the state delegate equivalent data it submitted to the Iowa Democratic Party. Tonight's release of data by the Iowa Democratic Party confirms Senator Bernie Sanders won the Iowa caucus, Sanders' senior advisor Jeff Weaver said. We also feel confident that the discrepancies we're providing tonight, in addition to those widely identified in the national media, mean that the state delegate equivalent count will never be known with any kind of certainty. Given the rules changes we fought for that required the release of the popular vote count, SDEs are now an antiquated and meaningless metric for deciding the winner of the Iowa caucus. Below is the list of discrepancies in the state delegate equivalent calculations that were submitted to but not yet considered by the party. 14 instances for a total of 2.50383 SDE. And then they list a bunch of them: Storm Lake 1, Warren County Norwalk Precinct 1, Des Moines 7, Woodbury 6, Sioux City 6, and it gives all the calculations. So you guys can go through this as well if you want to check everything. But it seems, based on what they published, that if the state delegate counts were allocated correctly, that Sanders would have had the highest popular vote in the first and final round like he did, as well as the state delegate equivalents, officially making him the winner of the Iowa caucus. But you might have noticed that they talked about the popular vote in there. So what's that all about? Well, if we take a look, we can see, even though the most recent final published results show that Pete Buttigieg was 0.1% higher in the total SDEs, we can see in the popular vote section that Bernie Sanders had more than 2,500 more votes than Pete Buttigieg in the final alignment. So despite winning the popular vote in Iowa, Bernie Sanders still lost to Pete Buttigieg because of how state delegate equivalents are allocated. You know, the big population centers have less proportional power than the rural counties, for example. And really, that's just the end of the story, guys. I mean, that's all we got. We still don't really know the full results because the Iowa Democratic Party, they came out. We even saw tweets from them saying, hey, when people started reporting a lot of the discrepancies, they're like, oh, we're going to release a minor correction now about some of the results. And even after they released those minor corrections, there's still a lot of discrepancies that they didn't correct. So this whole thing is just a total mess. It really, if anything, Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders both are the ones hurt most by this. And the person that benefits the most is likely someone like Joe Biden, who none of the media is really talking about how he had such a horrible showing in Iowa. He was projected to be either at least second place or even possibly the winner, and he placed fourth, just slightly ahead of Amy Klobuchar, who was in fifth. So this really helped out Biden, kind of hurt Sanders and Buttigieg as far as a lot of the media coverage. But what are you going to do? This is the system that we have. It's a total disaster for the Democrats. Donald Trump used this as an opportunity to make a lot of jokes at their expense and, make a lot of the claims that the system's rigged against Bernie and things like that. So what are you going to do? All right, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Social media links are in the description box below, as well as merch. Support us at nuancebro.com/join, and I'll see you next time, bro.